When a millionaire uncovers his wife's betrayal, the shocking truth about her relationship with their manservant leads to a dramatic confrontation. And if you cherish your family and love videos like this, subscribe to our channel to have 10 years of luck in your life. The launch party at the Carter Technologies headquarters buzzed with the energy of Silicon Valley's elite. The vast event space, with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the San Francisco skyline, served as the perfect backdrop for Ethan Carter's latest product reveal. Ethan, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that spoke of quiet wealth, stood beside his wife Sarah, their practiced smiles never wavering as they greeted guests. "The Carters are just perfect together, aren't they?" The whispered comment floated through the crowd as Ethan guided Sarah through the room with a hand at the small of her back. She wore an elegant black dress that complemented his suit, her blonde hair styled in loose waves that caught the light. They moved like dancers who had rehearsed their steps countless times, each gesture and laugh perfectly timed. The product launch itself was a testament to their carefully curated image. As Ethan demonstrated the new AI-powered personal assistant that would revolutionize home automation, Sarah stood nearby, nodding at all the right moments. Their performance was flawless, down to the way they occasionally caught each other's eyes across the room, sharing what appeared to be private moments of connection. David, their manservant, moved through the crowd with practiced ease. His presence was both essential and invisible, the mark of someone who understood his role in maintaining the illusion of perfection. He anticipated needs before they arose, appearing with fresh champagne just as glasses emptied, adjusting room temperatures without being asked, ensuring the event ran smoothly. But something shifted when David approached Sarah with a tray of drinks. The interaction lasted only seconds longer than necessary, but Ethan noticed. He was trained to notice details. It was what made him successful in tech. The slight lingering of Sarah's fingers as she took her glass, the way David's shoulders tensed almost imperceptibly when she spoke to him, the subtle change in her posture when he was near. During his toast to the assembled guests, Ethan spoke about innovation and the future, about breaking boundaries and pushing limits. His words were met with enthusiastic applause, but his attention was caught by a silent exchange happening at the edge of the crowd. Sarah, standing near a marble column, held David's gaze for just a moment too long. The champagne in Ethan's glass trembled slightly as his grip tightened. The moment passed quickly, covered by the continued applause and the rush of congratulations that followed. Ethan pushed the observation aside, focusing instead on the investors who crowded around him, eager to discuss potential partnerships and future developments. He was good at compartmentalizing. It was another skill that had served him well in business. But the seed of doubt had been planted. As the evening wore on, Ethan found himself tracking Sarah's movements with greater attention, noting each time she and David occupied the same space. He observed the careful distance they maintained, too perfect to be natural. It reminded him of code that had been too meticulously cleaned up, hiding its true function beneath a veneer of propriety. The party continued around him, a swirl of conversations about market shares and technological breakthroughs. Ethan played his part, discussing profit margins and user interfaces, but part of his mind remained fixed on those small moments of interaction between his wife and their manservant. Each time he looked their way, he found himself analyzing their body language like he would analyze data streams, searching for patterns and anomalies. As the night progressed, the weight of his observations settled into his chest like a cold, hard mass. The perfection of his life, the successful company, the beautiful wife, the admiration of his peers, began to feel like a carefully constructed facade, and for the first time, he could see the cracks beginning to show. The steady hum of conversation provided cover as Ethan stepped away from the main party area, phone pressed to his ear. The call was important, a potential investor from Singapore, but his attention kept drifting to the gathering he'd left behind. Through the glass doors of the balcony where he stood, he could see the party continuing without him. "Yes, we're projecting a fourth-quarter launch," he said into the phone, his voice steady despite his distraction. The words felt mechanical, rehearsed like so many other aspects of his life that suddenly seemed suspect. As he spoke about market projections and implementation timelines, his eyes tracked movement through the glass. Sarah and David had gravitating toward a quiet corner of the room. The space between them seemed charged with unspoken words. David leaned slightly forward, his head inclined towards Sarah as she whispered something that made him nod. Their bodies angled toward each other in a way that excluded the rest of the room. Even from this distance, Ethan could see Sarah's hand gesture animatedly as she spoke, a mannerism she usually reserved for conversations that truly engaged her. "I apologize," Ethan said into the phone, realizing he'd missed a question. "Could you repeat that?" The investor's voice faded into background noise as Ethan watched David's hand brush Sarah's arm. A touch so brief it could have been accidental. Sarah didn't step away. Instead, she adjusted her posture, creating an intimate bubble in the crowded room. Their conversation continued, hidden behind easy smiles that matched the party's celebratory atmosphere. When the call finally ended, Ethan remained on the balcony, his phone a dead weight in his hand. The cool night air provided little relief from the heat rising in his chest. He was about to return to the party when Marcus, his oldest friend and head of legal at Carter Technologies, joined him on the balcony. "Quite a show in there," Marcus said, lighting a cigarette. His tone carried a weight that made Ethan turn to face him. "The product launch is exceeding expectations," Ethan replied automatically, falling back on the safe territory of business metrics. Marcus took a long drag before speaking again. "Not talking about the launch, Ethan." He gestured toward the glass doors with his cigarette. "Your wife and the help. There's something there." The words hit Ethan like a physical blow, but he maintained his composed expression. Years of board meetings and investor presentations had taught him to mask his reactions. "They're just talking, Marcus." "Sure," Marcus said, exhaling smoke into the night air. "And I'm just a lawyer who doesn't notice patterns." He turned to face Ethan fully. "Look, I've known you too long to dance around this." The way they look at each other, the way they move around the room, it's like watching two magnets pretend they're not being pulled together. Ethan's hands gripped the balcony railing, his knuckles white. Inside, Sarah laughed at something David said, her head thrown back in genuine amusement. When was the last time he'd made her laugh like that? "I should get back," Ethan said, straightening his jacket. But Marcus placed a hand on his arm. "Before you do anything, ask yourself this. Are you more upset about what might be happening or about the fact that everyone else can see it?" The question followed Ethan as he moved back into the party. The room felt different now, as if Marcus's words had stripped away a filter. He noticed the subtle shifts in conversation as he passed groups of guests, the way eyes followed him with mixture of sympathy and curiosity. Had they all seen what he'd been trying so hard to ignore? Sarah was alone when he spotted her again, David having resumed his duties serving drinks. But now Ethan saw how Sarah's eyes tracked David's movement through the crowd, how she seemed to anticipate his path through the room. The sensation in his chest had evolved from heat to a cold, hard certainty. The perfect life he'd built, the carefully maintained image of success and happiness, was unraveling thread by thread. Each observation added to the weight of evidence he could no longer deny. As he watched his wife check her phone and glance toward the service entrance where David had disappeared, Ethan made a decision. This carefully choreographed dance of pretense would end tonight. The garden adjacent to the main event space offered an illusion of privacy. Meticulously maintained topiaries and strategic lighting created intimate pockets of shadow and light. Perfect for the confrontation Ethan could no longer postpone. He found Sarah near a marble fountain, its gentle splashing providing background noise that would mask their conversation from curious ears. "We need to talk," Ethan said, his voice level despite the tension coursing through him. Sarah turned, her composure slipping for just a moment before her social mask slid back into place. "Now, we're in the middle of the launch party," she said, gesturing toward the glass doors that led back to the main event. "Yes, now." Ethan moved closer, maintaining enough distance to appear casual to any observers, but close enough to keep his voice low. "I want to know what's going on between you and David." The question hung in the air between them. Sarah's fingers tightened around her champagne glass, her knuckles whitening. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't." Ethan's voice carried an edge he rarely allowed himself to show. "I've seen the looks, the touches, the whispered conversations. How long has this been going on?" Sarah's composure cracked. She set her glass down on the fountain's edge with deliberate care before meeting his eyes. You want to have this conversation? Fine. Let's talk about how I've spent the last 5 years playing the perfect corporate wife, smiling at the right moments, laughing at the right jokes, being the perfect accessory to your success story. Is that what this is about? You feeling like an accessory? Ethan struggled to maintain his own composure. We built this life together, Sarah. No, you built this life. I just fitted myself into the spaces you left available. Sarah's voice trembled with emotion. She'd clearly been containing for a long time. David sees me. Not as Mrs. Ethan Carter. Not as the perfect hostess or the smiling face in your press photos. He sees me as I am. The sound of approaching footsteps drew their attention. David appeared at the garden's entrance, his presence both expected and intrusive. He moved toward them with the same quiet confidence he showed while serving drinks, but there was something different in his bearing now. "Mr. Carter," David said, dropping the servile manner he usually maintained. "I believe I should be part of this conversation." Ethan turned to face him, anger finally breaking through his controlled exterior. "Part of this conversation? You're my employee. You're here to serve drinks and maintain order, not destroy my marriage." "Your marriage?" David's voice carried a challenge. "Or your carefully constructed image of a marriage?" Sarah moved to stand closer to David, the action itself a confirmation of everything Ethan had suspected. "David understands something you never have, Ethan. Life isn't about maintaining perfect appearances or meeting societal expectations. It's about being authentic, about allowing yourself and others to be real. And this is your version of being real? Sneaking around with our manservant." Ethan's voice rose slightly before he caught himself. "Your manservant?" David's expression hardened. "That right there. That's part of the problem. You see me as a role, a function, not a person. Did you ever once consider that I might have thoughts, feelings, ambitions of my own? Or was I just another piece of your perfect life, like your smart home systems and your automated servants?" The conversation had shifted, expanding beyond the personal betrayal into something larger. David continued, his words measured but intense. "Do you know what it's like to be invisible? To stand in rooms full of powerful people who look right through you? To serve drinks to tech billionaires discussing AI, ethics, and social equality while treating their human staff like furniture?" Sarah placed a hand on David's arm, a gesture of support that made Ethan's stomach turn. "This isn't just about us, Ethan. It's about the walls we build between people, the arbitrary lines we draw based on wealth, status, race." David helped me see how artificial it all is. The garden's strategic lighting cast harsh shadows across their faces as they stood in this triangle of tension. Ethan looked between them, his wife and his employee, united in their criticism of the life he'd built. The perfect evening he'd planned, meant to showcase his latest technological achievement, had transformed into a spotlight illuminating the fractures in his personal life and his worldview. "So, this is your revolution?" Ethan asked, his voice bitter. "Betraying me to make a point about social inequality? No sarà blaiv softly. This is about being honest for the first time in years. About acknowledging that real connections don't care about social boundaries or corporate hierarchies." The sound of laughter from the main party drifted into the garden, a jarring reminder of the public face they were all expected to maintain. But here, in this carefully manicured corner of Ethan's perfect world, those expectations had crumbled, leaving only the raw truth of their situation exposed under the garden lights. The raised voices from the garden began drawing attention. Party guests drifted toward the glass doors, their curiosity barely concealed behind polite expressions. Through the growing crowd, Ethan could see Marcus trying to direct people away, but the scene had already captured too much interest to be contained. A small group of tech journalists invited for the product launch had positioned themselves strategically near the entrance, their phones partially raised. In the age of instant media, Ethan knew this confrontation would soon become public fodder, regardless of how it ended. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion somewhere more private," Ethan suggested, his entrepreneur's instinct for damage control kicking in. "Why?" David's question carried a sharp edge. "Worried about your image? About what your investors might think when they see the real Ethan Carter?" The growing audience only seemed to embolden David. He stood straighter, his stance transforming from that of a servant to something more commanding. You know what's ironic? Your new AI system promises to make life more authentic, more connected. Yet here you are, trying to hide the most authentic moment you've had in years. You don't have the right to lecture me about authenticity. Ethan shot back, his carefully maintained composure cracking. You came into my home, accepted my trust, my employment. Employment? David interrupted, his voice carrying across the garden. Let's talk about that. Let's discuss how you pride yourself on being a progressive tech leader while maintaining a staff of modern-day servants. How you talk about breaking down barriers while building walls around your perfect life. The crowd at the doors had grown larger. Ethan could see phones being raised, recording the confrontation. Sarah stood between them, her earlier confidence wavering as she realized the public nature of their private drama. You think this is about employment? Ethan stepped closer. To David. This is about betrayal, about breaking trust. Trust? David's laugh was bitter. Trust is earned through respect, Mr. Carter. Real respect, not the kind that comes with a paycheck and a uniform. When was the last time you asked any of your staff about their lives? Their dreams? Their struggles? The questions hit Ethan like physical blows. He looked around at the gathered crowd, suddenly seeing his other household staff among them. Their faces revealed uncomfortable truths. Some avoided his gaze. Others watched with undisguised interest, and a few nodded slightly at David's words. I've always treated my employees fairly, Ethan defended, but his voice lacked conviction. Fairly? David's voice rose with passion. You pay well, yes. Provide good benefits, certainly, but you've created a modern-day downstairs, Mr. Carter. A separate world where we exist to serve without being seen. Until, of course, one of us dares to step out of our assigned role. Sarah moved closer to David, her action visible to everyone watching. The gesture spoke volumes, and Ethan heard the murmur ripple through the crowd. His personal humiliation was becoming a public referendum on privilege and power. You're turning my marriage into some kind of social justice statement, Ethan said through gritted teeth. No, David replied, his voice carrying a weight of conviction that commanded attention. Your marriage was already broken by the same walls you built around everything else in your life. Sarah and I, we're just the first crack in that perfect facade you've maintained. The crowd had grown silent, watching the exchange with the same intensity they'd shown during the product launch earlier. But this wasn't a carefully scripted presentation. This was raw, real, and completely beyond Ethan's control. You talk about innovation, David continued, addressing both Ethan and the watching crowd. About changing the world through technology. But what about the human element? What about the barriers we maintain in the name of tradition, propriety, social order? Ethan looked at Sarah, seeking any remnant of their shared life, but found her gaze fixed on David, her expression a mixture of admiration and relief. The perfect wife he'd thought he had was gone, replaced by someone he barely recognized, someone who seemed more alive, more real in her imperfection. The garden, designed for quiet conversations and strategic networking, had become a stage for a drama that would undoubtedly dominate tomorrow's tech blogs and social media. Ethan Carter, celebrated innovator and Silicon Valley success story, stood exposed not just as a betrayed husband, but as a symbol of the very inequality his industry claimed to be dismantling. As the crowd gradually dispersed, carrying whispers and recorded footage of the confrontation, Marcus guided Ethan to his private office, a glass-walled sanctuary now serving as a refuge from the imploding party below. The space, usually a symbol of his success, felt suddenly hollow. You need to get ahead of this, Marcus said, pulling up social media feeds on his tablet. #CarterDrama is already trending. The tech blogs are having a field day. He slid the tablet across the desk, but Ethan waved it away. Let them talk, Ethan said, staring out at the San Francisco skyline. The city lights blurred through the glass, matching his internal confusion. Marcus poured 2 glasses of scotch from the office bar, setting one in front of Ethan. This isn't just about your marriage anymore. David turned it into a social commentary. The media is painting him as a working-class hero challenging Silicon Valley elitism. A hero, Ethan laughed bitterly, finally turning from the window. He slept with my wife. And that's exactly why you need to listen to me right now. Marcus leaned forward, his lawyer's instincts kicking in. This story can go two ways. Either you're the tech mogul who lost his wife to the help, or you're a leader who faces hard truths and grows from them. The scotch burned Ethan's throat as he considered Marcus's words. On his office walls, magazine covers featured his carefully crafted image. The innovative leader, the progressive thinker, the perfect husband. Each one now seemed to mock him. What hard truths? Ethan asked, though part of him already knew the answer. Marcus set his glass down carefully. When was the last time you really looked at your life, Ethan? Not the success metrics, not the stock prices, but the actual substance of it. The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. Ethan's mind wandered to earlier that evening, before everything fell apart. He'd been so focused on the product launch, on maintaining the perfect image, that he'd missed the obvious signs of his crumbling marriage. David was right about one thing. Marcus continued, his tone gentler now. You built walls? Not just around your marriage, but around everything. You automated your home, but forgot about the human connections inside it. Outside the office, they could hear the party winding down, the murmur of departing guests mixing with the clicks of camera shutters. The media vultures were circling, waiting to see how Silicon Valley's golden boy would handle this very public fall from grace. Sarah, Ethan started, then stopped, realizing he didn't know how to finish that sentence. What could he say about a woman he thought he knew, but clearly didn't understand at all? Look happy tonight, Marcus finished for him. Not the practice smile she wears at your events. Actually happy. When was the last time you saw that? The question hit Ethan like a physical blow. He tried to remember, scrolling through mental images of corporate events, charity galas, product launches. Each memory showed Sarah performing her role perfectly. But that spark of genuine joy he'd seen tonight when she stood with David? He couldn't remember the last time he'd caused that. The press will want a statement, Marcus said, returning to practical matters. They'll want to know how the champion of AI ethics handles human complexity in his own home. They want to see me fall, Ethan replied, understanding finally dawning. The perfect life they've envied is cracking, and they want to watch it shatter. No, Marcus leaned back, studying his friend. They want to see if you're real. If behind all the success and innovation, there's an actual human being who can acknowledge mistakes, feel pain, learn, and grow. The weight of this realization settled over Ethan. His entire career had been built on pushing boundaries, challenging conventional thinking. Yet in his personal life, he'd clung to traditional structures, hierarchies, and appearances with an almost desperate intensity. His phone buzzed continuously with notifications, messages from board members, investors, friends. The story was spreading, gaining traction, being shaped by outside forces. But for the first time in years, Ethan wasn't thinking about market perception or brand management. What matters more? Marcus asked quietly. Maintaining the illusion of perfection or finding something real? The question echoed Sarah's earlier words about authenticity, about being seen for who she really was. Ethan stood, moving to the window again. Below, he could see Sarah and David leaving together, their figures small but distinct in the building's exterior lighting. They didn't sneak away or try to hide. They walked openly, confidently, already breaking down the barriers he'd spent years maintaining. After hours of damage control meetings and ignored phone calls, Ethan found himself walking through his empty mansion, footsteps echoing in spaces that suddenly felt too large, too sterile. His home automation system activated lights as he moved, an ironic reminder of how he'd prioritized technological perfection over human connection. He found Sarah and David in the their garden courtyard, sitting close together on a bench near the koi pond. The scene felt like a deliberate echo of countless corporate parties where they'd all played their assigned roles. But now the roles had shifted, leaving Ethan feeling like the intruder in his own home. "We need to talk," Ethan said, his voice carrying across the manicured lawn. Both Sarah and David looked up, their postures changing, but neither moving away from the other. The intimacy of their position felt like a physical blow. "I think we've talked enough for one night," Sarah replied, but her tone lacked its earlier anger. She seemed tired now, but also somehow lighter, as if unburdened by the weight of pretense. "No." Ethan moved closer, maintaining a careful distance. "We haven't talked at all. Not really. Not in years." The admission cost him something, but Marcus's words about authenticity echoed in his mind. David straightened, his servant's posture completely gone now. "Mr. Carter?" "Ethan," he corrected automatically, the formality suddenly seeming absurd given their situation. "If you're sleeping with my wife, you might as well use my first name." Sarah flinched at the bluntness, but David held Ethan's gaze. "Ethan," he acknowledged, "this isn't just about Sarah and me. This is about social inequality, the invisible barriers between classes, the hypocrisy of Silicon Valley." Ethan interrupted, his voice sharp. "You made those points quite clearly at the party. The tech blogs are already calling you a modern-day Robin Hood, stealing the heart of a tech baron's wife. Is that all I was to you?" Sarah's question cut through his bitterness. A possession? Something David stole? The question hung in the air between them. Ethan looked at his wife, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time in years. She sat straighter now, her corporate wife persona stripped away. Her hand rested naturally on David's arm, the gesture speaking of an ease they'd never achieved in their marriage. "You were my partner," Ethan finally said, his voice softer. "Or at least, that's what I thought we were building together. A partnership requires both people to be seen, Ethan." Sarah's words carried years of unspoken frustration. "When was the last time you asked me what I wanted? What I dreamed about? When did I become just another feature in your perfect life?" David remained silent, but his presence spoke volumes. He represented everything their marriage had lacked: authenticity, genuine connection, the courage to challenge established boundaries. "And you found that with him?" Ethan couldn't keep the hurt from his voice. "In secret meetings and stolen moments?" "There was nothing secret about it," David spoke up, his voice steady. "We were hiding in plain sight, just like every other truth you chose not to see. The only difference is that tonight, you finally looked." The garden's automated lighting adjusted, sensing the growing darkness. The technological convenience that had once seemed so essential now felt like another barrier, another way Ethan had substituted automation for genuine human interaction. "The board is meeting tomorrow," Ethan said, changing tactics. "They're concerned about the company's image, about how this situation will affect investor confidence." "There it is." Sarah's laugh held no humor. "Even now, you're thinking about the company, about image, about market perception. Do you see why I fell in love with David? He sees me as a person, not a corporate asset." The words stung, but Ethan forced himself to hear them, really hear them. He looked at David, the man who had shattered his perfect world, and saw not an employee or a rival, but a mirror reflecting all his own failings. "What do you want?" he asked, directing the question to both of them. It was perhaps the first genuine question he'd asked in years, unburdened by expectations or ulterior motive. "This." The silence that followed felt heavy with potential. In the distance, Ethan could hear his phone buzzing again. Probably more crisis management calls, more demands for statements and explanations. But here in his carefully maintained garden, surrounded by the ruins of his carefully maintained life, none of that seemed to matter anymore. The emptiness of the house struck Ethan with physical force as he entered his home office. Sarah had left with David, their departure marked only by the quiet click of the front door and the automated security system's cheerful notification. Front door accessed at 11:42 p.m. Scattered across his desk were remnants of their life together. Photographs from charity galas, tech conferences, vacation homes. Each image now seemed like a carefully staged production. Sarah's smile, practiced and perfect, never quite reached her eyes. Ethan picked up a frame from their 5th anniversary party, studying it with new awareness. Even then, standing among Silicon Valley's elite, they had been performing rather than living. His fingers moved across the keyboard, opening a blank document. The cursor blinked, waiting. Writing had always been his refuge when coding couldn't solve a problem. But what could he say to a woman who had already spoken her truth so clearly? "Dear Sarah," he typed, then deleted it. Too formal. Too much like a corporate memo. "Sarah," he tried again. The words began to flow. I built systems to automate everything because I thought efficiency equaled perfection. I created algorithms to predict and fulfill needs before they arose. Somewhere along the way, I applied the same logic to our marriage. I thought if I could anticipate and provide everything you might want, that would equal happiness. I never stopped to ask if you wanted to be part of a perfectly automated life. Tonight, watching you with David, I saw something I haven't seen in years, Joy. Not the programmed happiness we've been performing, but real, unfiltered emotion. It terrified me, not because you found it with someone else, but because I hadn't noticed its absence in our life together. His phone buzzed again. The screen displayed notifications from major tech publications. Breaking: Carter Technology CEO's personal life crashes during product launch. Silicon Valley's perfect couple. The automated marriage that failed. Class warfare in tech. When the help becomes the heart, social media was having a field day. Video clips from the party circulated, each one dissected and analyzed. Twitter threads spun elaborate theories about the symbolism of a tech titan's wife falling for their AI-managed home's human servant. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Ethan returned to his letter. The media will paint this as a scandal. They'll search for symbolism in how my attempt to perfect human experience through technology failed to perfect my own human connections. They'll be right, but not for the reasons they think. The truth is simpler and harder to face. I forgot that real relationships can't be optimized like code. They're messy, unpredictable, and require constant attention. Not the kind that comes from sensors and algorithms, but the kind that comes from being present, being vulnerable, being human. David didn't steal you. He simply showed you what I'd forgotten how to give: authenticity. While I was building walls of wealth and technology to protect our perfect life, you were suffocating inside them. His security system pinged, alerting him to movement at the gate. Paparazzi had begun gathering, hungry for images of the fallen tech titan. The irony was sharp. His need for privacy had led him to build these sophisticated security systems, yet they couldn't protect him from the most intimate kind of invasion. Opening another window on his computer, Ethan watched as various news sites began publishing their takes on the evening's events. The headlines grew more sensational by the minute. AI pioneer loses wife to human touch, the Carter affair. When Silicon Valley's automation dreams meet human reality, downstairs/upstairs in the digital age. A modern tech tale, each story seemed to mine their personal tragedy for broader social commentary. His PR team had already sent suggestive responses, carefully crafted statements about privacy and personal growth. But as Ethan returned to his letter, he realized the futility of trying to control this narrative. "I won't fight this," he continued writing. "Not in the press, not in the courts, not in our social circle. You found something real with David, something I forgot to nurture in my pursuit of perfection. The technology one created was meant to enhance human connection, not replace it. The irony of failing to apply that principle in my own life isn't lost on me. Perhaps this very public humbling is exactly what I needed. A reminder that the messiest human emotions can't be optimized, automated, or controlled. They can only be felt, expressed, and honored. I'm sorry I forgot how to do that with you." As he sat back, the cursor still blinking at the end of his unsent letter, Ethan realized he had no idea how to reach Sarah now. The woman he'd thought he knew so well had transformed into someone else entirely. Someone more real, more alive, and completely beyond his carefully controlled world. The security system announced Sarah's return at 3:47 a.m. with the same cheerful tone it used for everything. Ethan heard her footsteps in the hallway, no longer trying to be quiet, no longer playing the role of the careful wife. She found him in the kitchen, sitting in darkness, the blue light of his phone illuminating his face. "You've seen the headlines," Sarah said. It wasn't a question. She moved to the counter, her familiar gesture of making tea now somehow foreign in its casualness. "Tech Titan's AI empire crumbles as human drama unfolds," Ethan quoted from memory. "They're getting creative with the metaphors." Sarah's laugh held no humor. "I came to get some things," she said, turning to face him. In the dim light, she looked both stronger and more vulnerable than he'd ever seen her. "But we should talk first. Really talk. No cámaras." no audience, no performances. About how you fell in love with our manservant? The bitterness in his voice surprised even him. About how I fell out of love with an illusion, Sarah corrected, her voice steady. About how I spent years playing a role in your perfect life until I forgot who I was beneath the performance. The kitchen's motion sensors finally registered their presence, gradually raising the lights to their preferred evening setting. Another automated comfort that suddenly felt intrusive. Override lights, Ethan commanded. Set to 20%. The artificial brightness dimmed, leaving them in a more honest darkness. When did it start? He asked, dreading but needing to know. The affair? 6 months ago. Sarah's directness was new, another layer of pretense stripped away. But the distance between us? It started years ago, Ethan. Every time you solved a human problem with technology. Every time you automated another aspect of our life instead of actually living it. I gave you everything, Ethan protested, but the words sounded hollow even to him. You gave me a perfect life, Sarah agreed. Perfect house, perfect schedule, perfect image. Everything except the mess and chaos and beauty of real human connection. She paused, gathering thoughts. Do you know what attracted me to David? Ethan flinched, but Sarah continued. He noticed when the automation failed, when the coffee maker produced the perfect temperature, but I actually wanted it hotter. When the climate control kept the room at optimal conditions, but I was still cold. He noticed me, Ethan, not as a component in your perfect system, but as a person. And the emotional affair became physical, Ethan stated flatly. Yes. Sarah's honesty cut deeper than any evasion could have. But it was never just physical. David showed me what it means to be seen, to be known, not as Mrs. Carter, the perfect corporate wife, but as Sarah. The silence stretched between them, filled with years of unspoken truths. He started pointing out the gaps, Sarah continued, her voice softer now. Not in your technology, that's always perfect, but in our humanity, how we'd stop touching naturally because the house anticipated our needs. How we'd stop having real conversations because our AI assistants managed our schedules so efficiently we never had to coordinate or negotiate or just talk. Ethan remembered their last real argument, years ago, before he'd installed the house's advanced mood-sensing system that adjusted everything from lighting to music to prevent tension from building. Had he automated away even their ability to fight honestly? The board wants me to paint you as unstable, he admitted. To spin this as a mental health crisis triggered by the pressure of our lifestyle. They think it would play better than acknowledging you chose our servant over Silicon Valley's golden boy. Sarah's face hardened. And there it is again, image management, narrative control. Even now, you're thinking about how to optimize this failure. What do you expect me to do? Ethan's voice rose slightly. Watch my life, my company, my reputation crumble because you decided to find yourself in another man's arms? I expect you to feel something real. Sarah's composure finally cracked. Anger, pain, jealousy. Anything except calculating the market impact of your wife's infidelity. The outburst hung between them, raw and honest in a way their interactions hadn't been in years. For the first time since the revelation at the party, Ethan felt something break through his analytical approach to the crisis. A surge of pure, unprocessed emotion that no algorithm could optimize away. The kitchen's ambient lighting continued its gentle glow, indifferent to the emotional storm brewing within its perfectly regulated environment. Ethan's hand hovered over the smart panel, fighting the urge to adjust something, anything, to regain some sense of control. I think, he said carefully, pulling his hand back, we need a break. Time to process this without the media circus, without the corporate pressure, without your systems managing our responses. Sarah finished, a hint of bitter understanding in her voice. Before Ethan could respond, the security system chimed. David Matthews requesting entry at the main gate. The timing was almost theatrical. Sarah moved toward the entrance, but Ethan held up his hand. Wait, let me handle this. Through the security feed, they could see David standing at the gate, his posture no longer that of a servant, but of a man claiming his place in the world. Ethan's finger hesitated over the access panel. You know he'll find another way in if you deny him, Sarah said quietly. He knows all your security protocols. He's lived with them, worked around them, seen their flaws. The irony wasn't lost on Ethan. His employee had not only found the weaknesses in his marriage, but in his carefully constructed security systems as well. With a sharp gesture, he authorized entry. David entered the kitchen moments later, his presence immediately changing the dynamic. The triangle of tension between them felt almost physical in the carefully regulated air. "Sarah," David said softly, then turned to Ethan with a measured nod. "I came to help Sarah pack some things, but I think we all need to address this situation properly." "Address this situation?" Ethan's laugh held no humor. "Like it's some technical glitch to be debugged?" "No," David replied steadily. "Like it's a human reality that needs to be faced. You've built an empire on making life smoother, more efficient, more perfect. But real life, REA-L relationships, they're meant to have friction. They're meant to be challenging." Sarah moved to stand beside David, the action itself a clear statement. "I'm leaving tonight, Ethan. Not because I hate you, but because I need to remember who I am without all this perfection surrounding me." The word perfection hung in the air like an accusation. Ethan watched as David placed a supportive hand on Sarah's shoulder, the gesture natural and unthinking. How many times had his own touches been calculated, part of their choreographed public performance? "I could have security remove you," Ethan said to David, but the threat sounded hollow even to his own ears. "But you won't," David replied calmly, "because deep down, you understand that this isn't about security protocols or property rights. This is about human connection, something all your technology was meant to enhance, not replace." Sarah stepped forward, her expression both determined and sad. "I need to pack, Ethan. Then we can talk about how to handle this, the practical details, the public statement, everything. But right now, I need space that isn't monitored, controlled, or optimized." "The guest wing," Ethan found himself saying. "The systems are offline there since the last upgrade. Take whatever time you need." The surprise on Sarah's face at this small concession to imperfection spoke volumes. She nodded, then moved toward the stairs, David following a step behind. "David," Ethan called out, causing both to pause. "You were right about one thing. I did build walls, but they weren't just to keep others out. They were to maintain an illusion I thought everyone wanted, myself included." David turned back, his expression thoughtful. "The problem with illusions, Mr. Carter, is that eventually reality finds its way through the cracks. Tonight wasn't just about Sarah and me. It was about all the automated perfection finally giving way to human truth." As they disappeared upstairs, Ethan remained in the kitchen, surrounded by his smart devices and automated comforts. For the first time, he noticed the constant hum of machinery, the subtle adjustments of temperature and lighting, the endless small corrections his systems made to maintain optimal conditions. He reached for the main control panel, his finger hovering over the master override. With one command, he could shut it all down: the climate control, the mood lighting, the security protocols. But he realized that even that would be another form of control, another attempt to manage an unmanageable situation. Instead, he sat in his perfectly regulated kitchen, letting himself feel the messy, unoptimized emotions he'd been automating away for years. As Sarah and David descended the stairs with their packed bags, a new figure appeared in the kitchen doorway. Marcus stood there, his expression grave, holding a tablet that cast blue light across his features. "We need to talk," Marcus said, but his eyes weren't on Ethan. They were fixed on David. "All of us. Whatever legal threats you're here to deliver," David began, but Marcus cut him off. "This isn't about legal threats." Marcus placed the tablet on the kitchen counter, sliding it toward them. "This is about the truth. The whole truth." On the screen was an investment portfolio, complex, comprehensive, and familiar to Ethan. It was the kind of document he reviewed daily, except this one bore David's name. Not as an employee, but as a major stakeholder in several competing tech companies. "You're not just a servant," Ethan said slowly, the pieces falling into place. "You're a plant." David's posture shifted subtly, his hand dropping from Sarah's back. The servant's demeanor that had already begun to fade now vanished completely, replaced by something harder, more professional. I prefer the term investigative investor, David replied, his accent shifting slightly, the carefully maintained working-class tone giving way to summit. Being more educated, more polished. Though corporate watchdog has a nice ring to it. Sarah stepped back, looking between David and the tablet. What is this? David Matthews. Marcus read from another document, or should I say David Chun, holds significant positions in 3 of your major competitors, Ethan. He's been investigating tech companies from the inside for years, exposing what he calls the human cost of digital perfection. The kitchen's ambient lighting seemed to pulse with the tension in the room. Sarah's face had gone pale, her packed bags forgotten at her feet. Was any of it real? She whispered to David. David's expression softened as he turned to her. The feelings were real, Sarah. You were never part of the investigation. You were. He paused, searching for words, an unexpected variable in an otherwise calculated equation. How poetic, Ethan said bitterly. You came to expose my company's hypocrisy and found my wife's unhappiness a convenient bonus? I came to understand how the man who claims to enhance human connection through technology treats the humans closest to him, David corrected. Your wife's unhappiness wasn't a bonus. It was evidence. Evidence that all your perfect systems, all your automated solutions, all your technological innovations were creating walls instead of bridges. Sarah sank into a kitchen chair, her composure cracking. So, I traded one man's manipulation for another's? No. David moved toward her, but she held up a hand to stop him. Sarah, everything between us was genuine. Yes, I had an agenda with Carter Technologies, but falling in love with you wasn't part of it. Love? Ethan's laugh was harsh. You're a corporate spy who seduced my wife to prove a point about technology? I'm an advocate who exposed how your pursuit of digital perfection has created a new class system, David shot back. The servants who maintain your automated paradise while the masters live in carefully regulated comfort. Tonight wasn't just about your marriage, Ethan. It was about pulling back the curtain on the whole illusion. Marcus cleared his throat. The story breaks in full tomorrow. Every major tech publication has it. The corporate infiltration, the investigation, everything. They're calling it the Carter Deception. The irony of the situation struck Ethan with physical force. He had spent years building systems to predict and prevent every possible problem. Yet he had missed the human deception playing out under his own roof. So what happens now? Sarah asked, her voice small but steady. Was I just collateral damage in your corporate expose? David moved to kneel beside her chair, his carefully constructed servant's persona completely gone. You were the unexpected truth in my planned deception. I came here looking for evidence of corporate hypocrisy, but I found something more important. Proof that genuine human connection can't be replicated or regulated by any system, no matter how perfect. The kitchen fell silent save for the gentle hum of Ethan's automated systems, still faithfully maintaining optimal conditions in a room where nothing was optimal anymore. The 4 of them stood frozen in this moment of revelation. Ethan with his shattered illusions, Sarah with her complicated truths, David with his exposed deception, and Marcus witnessing it all. Tomorrow, Marcus said quietly, this becomes public. The media will tear apart every aspect, the corporate espionage, the love affair, the social commentary. They'll make it about technology versus humanity, about class warfare in the digital age, about the price of perfection. But tonight, David added, looking between Sarah and Ethan, it's still about the 3 of us. About the lies we told ourselves and each other. About what's real beneath all the perfection. The security system chimed softly, announcing the arrival of dawn with the same cheerful efficiency it announced the very thing. In the growing light, they all looked at each other, stripped of pretense, automation, and carefully maintained images. The perfect life Ethan had built lay in ruins around them, but in its place stood something else, something messy, painful, and undeniably real. The question now wasn't about controlling the narrative or managing the fallout. It was about what they would choose to build from the ashes of their automated paradise.